All right, the time is 7:30 p.m. I'd like to start this meeting. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Zoning Board of Adjustment, Old Bridge Township. Meeting for June 18, 2020.
No, I can't hear.
I'm James Sullivan, as Chairman of the Board. I would ask you now to join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of our country. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
under God, indivisible,
with liberty.
with justice, liberty for all.
Adequate notice of this meeting of the Old Bridge Township Zoning Board of Adjustment has been provided in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act at least 48 hours prior to the commencement of this meeting, by primarily posting in the municipal complex an announcement giving the time, the date, the location, and the agenda of this meeting. Also by mailing such an announcement to the Home News and Tribune, and finally, filing a copy with the municipal clerk and posting on the municipal website. Ms. Silverman, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Dewhurst? Is everybody unmuted? I can't see. I got the screen in front of me. Mr. Dewhurst? I did see him. Mr. Connor?
Here.
Ms. Kilduff?
Here.
Mr. Scogno?
Here.
Mr. Walker?
Here.
Mr. Sarkowski?
Here.
Mr. Stoner?
Here.
Chairman Sullivan?
Here.
Mr. Sachs?
Here.
Mrs. Shapiro? Ms. Shapiro? Ms. Sawant?
Yeah.
Mr. Garrity? And myself, Kim Silverman.
Ms. Silverman, Nicole Shapiro here. Sorry about that.
That's good.
I thank you, Kim. This meeting is being conducted electronically via the internet by a webinar. It is unique, and it has taken some patience on all involved, as we're no longer gathered together in the courtroom in the township, but we're doing so from our own homes. This meeting is also being televised simultaneously by OBTV Channel 15 and as well as YouTube. I remind those watching on TV or on the internet and on YouTube that there's up to a 30-second delay in communication. This will be important for you to remember if you wish to personally join the public portion later on in the meeting. Anyone calling in must lower their device or you'll be confused by the time delay. I would ask all participants now from the board and the professionals, please silence your cell phone at this juncture to avoid any disturbances. Our meeting will follow the same protocols as always. We start off with some general housekeeping matters to start, and they'll be followed this evening by one application. I don't anticipate a recess this evening as we only have one, and the stenographer, the court reporter, will only be working on that last matter of the evening. If there is a need, obviously we will take one, and if you're watching at home, you'll see a sign that says recess, and we'll come back within 5 minutes. As in all applications, there's a public portion that follows testimony. If you have a particular interest this evening in the application, and you wish to ask questions via telephone, I suggest that you take notes during the presentation to refresh your memory when you call. Now would be the perfect time to get your pad and pen or paper. On what you should see on your device, whether it be television or YouTube right now, is the virtual zoning board meeting notice. I'm going to ask our professional planner, Ms. Sawant, who is also the moderator and host of this meeting, who controls the calls coming in and mutes or unmutes the various people who are going to speak. I'm going to turn it over to her to remind some of those, the public at home, how to exactly call in and what will happen. Ms. Sawant, please.
Good evening, all. Here are a few announcements. First, for zoning board members. Zoning board members, please please remember, you will be unmuted during the first half of the meeting when you will be required to vote on other agenda items. The zoning board attorney, the zoning board chairman, zoning board secretary, and the court reporter will remain unmuted throughout the meeting. Everyone else will be muted once the presentation of applications begins. The applicants' professionals will be asked to turn on their video and unmute themselves in order in which they will testify. During the public commentary period, I will announce the last four digits of the caller's phone number to come forward, announce their name and address. I will also announce the last four digits of the next caller's phone number so that he or she knows that they are next in line. You will only be able to hear the residents. You will not be able to see them. We will share our screen to display any exhibits. Please be mindful that there is a 30-second time lag in the presentation. The meeting information, which you see on your screen right now, will be displayed on the screen multiple times during the meeting so that any resident who wishes to call can call in and join the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sawant. I would remind all board members, when you are going to speak, please state your name before you speak so that it's for the record. Obviously, we're not sitting in a courtroom where everyone can see it. And that comes into play particularly for the stenographer who is not familiar with our voices or our positions because she has nothing to reference. Lastly, I would say, when I ask a question, when I want the board, and I want any of you to respond or ask you if you have any questions, I'm going to start from left to right as we sit. So we start with Mr. Scogno, and we end up on the other side of the dais if we were in the courtroom with Mr. Sikowski. Mr. Sikowski, you will be voting this evening on any matters. Okay, we can move on with the agenda. The second item is the minutes, board members. We have two. I'll take them individually. May 7th, 2020. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to review them. Absent any commentary or suggestions for additions or deletions, I would ask someone to move it so we can memorialize it.
I'll move it. Leon Scogno.
Mr. Scogno, is there a second?
Connor, second.
Mr. Connor seconds. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dewhurst? Mr. Dewhurst? Is John there?
His video's not on either.
There he is.
There he goes.
There he is. Okay.
I'll wait for him. Okay, Mr. Dewhurst?
John, we didn't get your vote.
Raise your hand if you're okay. Okay. Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Geldof?
Yes.
Mr. Scogno?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Sikowski?
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan?
Yes. Board members, the same will apply to the minutes from May 21, 2020. Absent any commentary, I'm going to ask someone to move them into the record.
Motion.
Ms. Kilduff, is there a second?
I'll second. Ben Stoner.
Mr. Stoner has seconds. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dewhurst?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Geldof?
Yes.
Mr. Scogno?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Sikowski?
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan?
Yes. Next item on the agenda is a discussions matter, or listed as a discussions matter. It's 39-18Z Oak Tree Plaza at OB. This is for relief of a condition. Board members, Steve Goen is representing the applicant. I'm sure everyone had a chance to read the letter that he authored. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Goen to put on the record exactly what his intentions are. Sir?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Before I start, though, Steve Goen from Giordano, Halloran, and Cecil. Before I start, I would like to point out to Kim that you might want to check the privacy settings on Zoom because I see that Mr. Pressler has found his way in. And I don't know if it's your intention to just let anybody like Mr. Pressler wander his way into a hearing like this, but
Well, he's on another application.
just make sure you check that out. Because
He had nothing else to do, Steve.
I want to make sure he didn't show up to object to what I'm about to say. He might now anyway. So in any event, the board will recall that we obtained preliminary and final approval for this project some months ago. The resolution is dated January 16th, 2020 for final approval. This project includes a 36-unit apartment building and 2 commercial buildings along Route 34. Condition 5 of the resolution states that I'll just read it so we get it accurately. The applicant agreed that the first commercial building, Building B, would be completely constructed and completed prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy for the proposed residential building, and that after the last certificate of occupancy is issued for Building B, construction of the second commercial building, Building A, would commence no later than 12 months thereafter. So basically the COs for the residential building were tied to the completion of Building B. And what we're asking for is relief from that condition. The reason being, obviously, everybody has been impacted by what's going on, and the retail market is no exception. So we're contemplating a retail building there along Route 34, and what we've asked for is essentially a 12-month extension of that condition to allow the residential building to go first, and then give us 12 months to get the retail building constructed after that and CO'd. Just in light of the fact that, the retail market being what it is, in light of the state of emergency, it's become very tough for our client to work out construction financing for this project because of that retail building being tied to the residential building. So that's essentially our request. We put in proposed language for a modified condition, and we were asking for the board to grant that relief.
Thank you, Mr. Gahn. I did read your letter in its entirety, and while I am not a lawyer, it sure sounds to me like an amended application. But I'm going to ask Mr. Sachs to school the board on this one, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Goen, thank you for the presentation. I also received your May 21st, 2020 letter, reviewed it, and certainly very familiar with the application since it was only recently approved last year. After reading the letter and after reviewing the resolution, it is my opinion, at least, that, and my recommendation to the board, that this is a significant and substantial change to this project. It's not a de minimis change that would be worthy of an administrative approval by the board. So, and I agree with Mr. Sullivan, this is a significant change, and obviously, as such, it would require the applicant to come back with an amended site plan. And as a result of that, also providing notice to the public and permitting the public to have comment on that at a future zoning board hearing. So although I do appreciate what's going on with the current pandemic that we're all suffering from, and the fact that it's had impact on the commercial and retail market, this is something really that needs to be explored at a full hearing by way of an amended site plan.
Okay, so procedurally, I think then, and I understand the board's position on that, and we actually, we can have that application prepared and submitted. I mean, essentially, we're going to be asking for waivers for a number of items because it's going to be the same site plan that you've already seen. We're not actually going to be amending any of the buildings or roads or anything like that, just this condition. So we can prepare and submit that application expeditiously. And we just hope for some consideration to be on the agenda as soon as possible because we'd like to begin construction soon.
Yeah, I would suggest, Mr. Goen, that you submit a request for the waivers. And I would agree, since you're not really changing anything, and most of those waivers, if not all, could probably be granted. But again, we still have to go through that process.
Understood.
Okay, anything else, Mr. Sachs, that you want to enlighten the board with?
A quick question. Are you having 2 board meetings in July, or is there only one? I know that the first meeting's right around the July 4th holiday.
Just one on the 16th.
On the 16th, okay. So we're going to try to get that application as soon as possible so we can at least get deemed complete on the 16th if we could.
All right. Anything else, Mr. Sachs, that you need to tell the board?
No, I think I think I've said what I needed to say, and certainly at a future date, hopefully, if they get their waivers in, we could hear the waivers at least on the 16th of July, and hopefully this could be heard in August at some point. But of course, the board is going to listen to any application with an open mind, and you'll make your decision at that point.
Absolutely. In deference to the professionals, Ms. Shapiro, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, Chairman.
Okay,
Thank you.
Mr. Wan.
No, Chairman.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Goen, for your appearance this evening, and we look forward to meeting again, I guess, maybe perhaps next month.
Thank you, and good luck to Mr. Pressler and to Mr. Sardo, who, my colleague, Mr. Sardo. So it's a family affair tonight.
Okay.
Good luck, everybody.
Good night now.
Good night, Steve.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, we have the next item on the agenda is a completeness waiver. It's 9-2020Z. It's St. Mary and Archangel Raphael Coptic Orthodox Church. It's block 418611, lot 2.11. George Pressler is representing the applicant. I don't see Mr. Pressler there.
I think I saw him as a
John Plaskanka.
participant.
Is just Mr. Plaskanka going to make a commentary?
John?
We have to turn him on first.
I
Yeah.
did.
Okay, there we go.
Mr.
I see John. John, unmute. You have to unmute yourself. There you go. John, unmute yourself.
Up in the top right corner, Mr. Plaskanka, there's a little red thing. If you, or I'm sorry, bottom left. If you click on that, you'll unmute yourself.
Here we go.
There you go.
There, you got it.
Mr. Holari here is my special guy next working with me.
John, you're going to talk?
Did you want to say anything on behalf of the applicant, sir?
We have the letter from Vina, which outlines the variances and their suggestions that they waive all the requests we have, excepting items 13, 22, 40B, and 52. And we concur that that's fine. This is a fully improved site. It's a former Patel cash and carry. Parking is there, building is there, landscaping, lighting, everything. So this is fine. We agree with Vina to provide these extra 4 items and move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Plaskanka. For the board members, if you didn't catch that, the block and lot number I called out is the Patel Market, which we granted a few years back. It's at the, it would be, you would notice it off of Route 9. That's called Old Amboy Road at the dead end there, and I can't remember what the little side street is called. Probably one, Bruce, you probably know the name of the street, but.
Ardle Lane.
Thank you. So most of you would be familiar with it as the Patel Market.
Carry.
Yeah, and they have apparently gone out of business. I didn't realize that. So that is where they're talking about. So it's already a fully built site. With that, rather than me read into the record Mrs. Sawant's commentary, I'm just going to let her explain to the board. Ma'am?
Yes. So this is like Mr. Plaskanka said, it's a fully developed site. It was approved as Patel Cash and Carry, and they've been out of business. So now the church wants to go in St. Mary's. Church would like to move into that same building. There is no significant site improvements proposed other than a few landscaping changes, but there will be no addition to the building. Most of the changes will be interior. So I really recommend that the board waives all the waivers except for 3 actually, because item 22, proof of payment of taxes, our office received that today. So you no longer need a waiver for proof of payment of taxes. It's 3 items that we need. I would recommend that the board not grant a waiver. That's item 13. That's the scale of the drawings. 40B, which is a partial waiver. I would recommend that any new plantation that is proposed, the applicant includes the common and botanical names, sizes, plant schedule for those proposed trees. And then a tree permit would be required because in the application, the applicant is proposing to remove few trees and replant newer trees.
Mr. Plaskanka?
We concur.
Thank you. Mr. Sachs, you have anything?
No, I don't, Mr. Chairman. I've listened to Ms. Savant, and I believe this is a fully developed site, so
Right.
the waivers are probably appropriate.
Thank you. Board members, anyone that I can see on the screen, if you have a commentary, just raise your hand. Mr. Scogno, you have a commentary? None. Okay. I see no one else who's waved their hand. So would someone like to move these waivers as they're read in by Ms. Savant?
I'll make a motion, Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Is there a second?
Second, Dewhurst.
Dewhurst is second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dewhurst,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Ms. Kilduff,
Yes.
Mr. Scogno,
yes,
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Psychowski,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Ploskanka, for your appearance this evening. And I don't see Mr. Presley, but if he's listening, thank you as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Next item we have is escrow deficiencies. I apologize for my phone ringing in the background. It's not my cell phone, it's my house phone. Yes, I still have one. We have escrow deficiencies in this report as long as I can see them. I'm going to call them all in at one time. 37-19Z is Vision Aldridge 3 LLC in the amount of $2,500 that has been paid. 3819Z Old Bridge Rifle and Pistol Club, that's in the amount of $1,500 that has been paid. 39-19Z Janet Budge, the $350 that has been paid. And finally, 5-2020Z Bayshore Development LLC in the amount of $1,250. Mr. Sachs, any problem with us taking this as a block vote, correct?
Yes, we can, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, would someone like to move them?
Move them, Dewhurst.
Is there a second?
I'll second it, Leon Scogno.
I think Scogno has second on that.
That's
Roll call,
correct.
please.
Mr. Dewhurst,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Ms. Kilduff,
Yes.
Mr. Scogno,
Yes,
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Psychowski,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes. The next item would be resolutions. We have three this evening. I'll call them in order as listed. 5-2020Z, Bayshore Development LLC. Mr. Sachs?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is application 5-2020Z, applicant Bayshore Development LLC. It was an application for D4 and C variances, property located block 1, lot 10, 10 Cliffwood Way. Public hearing was held on May 21st of 2020. The applicant was represented by Mr. Clauser. The applicant applied for D4 and C variance relief to construct a new single-family residential dwelling on the property, as the previous residential dwelling was destroyed by Superstorm Sandy. There were several aspects of this construction. One of them was to construct a new 3-story single-family dwelling, the first floor containing a garage and storage space that is constructed of flood-resistant building materials. Secondly, a paved driveway at the front of the lot. Third, the construction of a second-floor wood deck attached to the rear of the dwelling. And finally, associated site improvements, including lighting and parking. The property is located in the R5 zone, which requires a floor area ratio of 0.4. Proposed home would have a FAR of 0.5. The proposed home measures 1,390 square feet, and there were several C variances for minimum lot area, minimum lot width, minimum side yard setback, minimum side yard, minimum building height, deck side yard setback, deck rear yard setback, and AC unit side yard setback. There were several witnesses who testified, professional engineer, Mr. Sharif Ali, and the professional planner, Ms. Christine Bell. The application was approved at the hearing on May 21st, and the only special conditions of approval, actually, there were no special conditions. We just had the normal conditions of approval. So again, this was an application that was approved for D4 variance and for C variance, and you can vote on the resolution this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. Board members, you've heard the resolution. Someone like to move it?
I'll move it.
Mr. Sikorsky. Is there a second?
Second, Kilduff.
Second by Virginia Kilduff. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dewhurst,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Ms. Gelder,
Yes.
Mr. Scogno,
yes,
Mr. Walker,
yes,
Mr. Sikorsky,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan,
Yes. 39-19Z, Janet Budge. Mr. Sacks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, application 3919Z, applicant Janet Budge, also requesting D4 and C variances. Property located block 220, lot 28 at 47 Woodshore West. This was also an application that was heard on May 21st of 2020. The applicant appeared pro se. The applicant is applying for C and D4 variance relief to construct a second floor addition to the existing home. Proposed addition will include 2 storage areas, one above the existing living area that measures approximately 672 square feet, and an attic space above the existing bedrooms on the second floor that measures 624 square feet. Property located in the R6 zone, which permits an FAR of 0.35. Existing home has a floor area of 1,885.1 square feet, which results in an FAR of 0.29. With the proposed addition, the increase will go to 0.40. There were also several C variances for minimum lot area, minimum lot width, minimum front yard, minimum side yard setback, minimum combined side yard setback, minimum rear yard, minimum building height, and maximum floor area ratio. The witnesses who testified were Catherine Budge, sister of the applicant, and also Mr. Ronald Kazmarski, a licensed architect. The only special condition of approval, the applicant agreed that the attic space above the existing bedrooms on the second floor can only be utilized for storage due to limited height and the non-existence of any windows. And again, this was heard on May 21st, and it was approved for D4 and C variances.
Mr. Sacks, as a matter of the record, while she was pro se, she is not the applicant. She was the sister, correct? And
Yes,
she was advised of the rules and did waive her right to have a stenographer.
that is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Board members, you've heard the resolution. Would someone like to move?
Connor, I'll move it.
Is there a second?
Second, Kilduff.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dewhurst,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Ms. Gelder,
Yes.
Mr. Scogno,
yes,
Mr. Walker,
yes,
Mr. Sikorsky,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan,
Yes. The final one is 2-2020Z, 2203 Route 9 LLC, Song Lake. Mr. Sacks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Application 02-20Z, applicant 2203 Route 9 LLC. This was an application for major preliminary and final site plan with D1 use variance, C variances, and design waiver approval. Property located 10259 lot 9 block 10259 lot 9.12 at 2203 US Highway 9. This was an application that was heard on May 7th. The applicant was represented by Peter Clauser. The applicant is seeking to convert the existing convenience store into an ice cream shop. The building footprint will remain unaltered at 1,375 square feet, and the parking lot will be resurfaced and restriped. The proposed parking area will contain 33 parking spaces. Additional site improvements include landscaping, lighting, pavement, outdoor seating, signage, and the installation of a septic field. D1 use variance is required as short order eating establishments with product specialty, i.e. ice cream, is not a permitted use in the CC zone. There were also several bulk variances for minimum lot area, minimum lot width, minimum front yard setback, minimum side yard, single and combined, minimum rear yard, maximum building height, maximum impervious coverage, maximum floor area ratio, minimum landscape area ratio, buffer from residential zone, and buffer along Route 9, as well as signage, which was compliant. There were also several design waivers that were requested. I won't read them all because they were rather lengthy, but in any event, they were granted. There was testimony from several witnesses. Ms. Lena Belorda Barone, who provided engineering testimony. Mr. Randall Barringer, a traffic engineer, Mr. Daniel Block, a professional planner. As well, the applicant testified, Ms. Song Lee. And this application was approved with several conditions. Let me read them into the record. The applicant agreed to limit occupancy at the outdoor seating area to a maximum of 20 patrons, to install lit bollards adjacent to the outdoor seating area, subject to the review and approval of the professional staff, to provide a site triangle for the review and approval of the professional staff, to replace any deteriorated sections of sidewalk on the Route 9 frontage and construct ADA ramps at the intersection of Route 9 North and Arcade Lane, and driveway access provided said areas under the control and jurisdiction of the Township of Old Bridge, provide supplemental and additional landscaping where deemed necessary by the professional staff, reopen the interior driveway access between ShopRite and the subject site, receive approval from the Township Forester as to any tree removal and if a permit is required, and will apply for same, and also apply and obtain for Title 39 enforcement on the site. Again, this was an application heard on May 7th. It was approved for D1 variance relief, C variances and design waivers, and major preliminary and final site plan.
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. Board members, you've heard the resolution. Does someone like to move it? Mr. Scott now moves it. Is there a second?
Second, Psychowski.
Psychowski seconds. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dewhurst,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Ms. Kilduff,
Yes.
Mr. Scogno,
yes,
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Psychowski,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes. Interesting repurposing of that site for those listening in on YouTube or watching on TV. They went from dispensing gasoline and they're going to dispense ice cream. Good repurpose.
Yes.
This brings us to our only application of the evening, and I hope Mr. Sardo doesn't have to walk far to the desk. He's probably ready. This is 11-2020Z, Waste Management of New Jersey. This is block 4230, lot 14.11, 16.11, and 23, located 283 Highway 34. This is to construct a compressed natural gas vehicle fueling system. A major site plan and final with the variance. John Sardo, Esquire, is representing the applicant. Sir?
Good evening. Thanks, Mr. Chairman and board members. So the applicant this evening is Waste Management of New Jersey, Inc. You might be familiar with Waste Management, I'm sure. They're a leading provider of waste disposal in North America. And as part of that, they have a company-wide sustainability initiatives, which is part and parcel of our application this evening, which is the conversion of and the replacement of the existing diesel waste hauling fleet with a fleet that is powered by compressed natural gas. We'll be referring to that as CNG as we are witnesses throughout this application. And the site was previously approved in 2003 and 2006 by this board via use variance relief. And that was at a time when the zoning was different. Now it's EDO-1, which allows the existing use as a conditionally permitted use. And we're back before the board part and parcel because we do not satisfy one of those conditions, which is 1,000-foot separation between other vehicle maintenance uses, and there's two others in the proximity. So as the chairman mentioned, we're seeking amended preliminary and final site plan approval with conditional D3 variances, as well as some ancillary C variances and waivers that are pointed out and summarized in the engineering and planning review letter. One important point I'd like to make is that the existing fleet will be phased out over time and replaced with a new compressed natural gas fleet. There won't be any additional overall waste hauling vehicles on the site, and therefore there'll be no anticipated traffic implications or additional trips at all to the site based on this. It's really the site plan improvements relating to the facility upgrades to allow the compressed natural gas to be conveyed and put into the vehicles on site. I have two witnesses this evening. We have an engineer, Thomas Mitchell. He'll be presenting he's prepared the plans and will be presenting the engineering testimony. And I also have Barbara Elan of Beacon Planning. She's a professional planner licensed in New Jersey and will provide the justification for the variances. So that's kind of my intro, and ready to call the first witness unless the board has any questions or housekeeping.
Mr. Sardo, I just have a quick question. I'm assuming there's a court reporter somewhere on these Hollywood squares here that I'm looking at?
That's Fran.
I'm sorry, Kim?
Fran DeBella.
Okay, thank you. I just wasn't sure. Okay.
I didn't see her on the Hollywood squares, as you put it, and I was frantically emailing and texting, and I found out that she indeed has been here. So
very good.
And I actually see her now, her name popping up on my screen.
I saw it. That's fine. Okay.
Can we check and make sure she hears us?
Fran.
Good evening, everybody. Yes, I do hear you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Mr. Sardo, call your first witness. Mr. Sachs will swear the person in.
Okay, Thomas Mitchell, PE of T. Mitchell Engineering.
Mr. Mitchell, please raise your right hand. I'll swear you in. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Please state your name, spelling your last name, professional affiliation for the record.
Thomas Mitchell, Mitchell, professional engineer in the state of New Jersey.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Mr. Sardo, just for the benefit of those who are unfamiliar with how these matters and are watching at home or on YouTube, please have him put his credentials on the record so they understand who the man is.
Of course. Mr. Mitchell, would you please provide the board with your education and licensing background, and also indicate if you've appeared before any boards before and been accepted as an expert witness?
Sure. So, yeah, I've got a Bachelor's of Science degree in engineering from the University of California in Berkeley. I actually carry a professional engineering license in about 38 states, including New Jersey. I have spoken in front of a board or testified as an expert witness numerous times throughout the country.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell, for informing those on the board and at home. You can proceed, Mr. Sardo. We accept his expertise.
Thank you. And just as a matter of housekeeping, Mr. Mitchell, you're familiar with the site, and you visited the site, and you've prepared the site plans that are before the board this evening?
That is correct. I've visited the site. I'm familiar with the site as well as the application.
Okay. And you prepared the plans that are before the board, 7 sheets. Would you, and I guess, are exhibits pre-marked, Mr. Sachs, or do I have to mark the plans if we're going to refer to them right now?
Larry.
Oh, perfect.
I'm sorry about that. Anything that was not included in the submission, we can mark it as it pops on the screen, so that's fine. So
Okay.
it looks like this first exhibit has to be marked.
These were submitted. These are the plans that we've submitted before the board, but if you want to mark them, I'm happy to do that.
Is that colorized? Was the colorized portion of it marked though?
Yeah, colorized, this was as submitted, not.
Okay, all right. Then that's fine. If you just want to have the witness just testify to the sheet as he's referring to it, that's fine.
Sure, and I believe this, just for the purposes of the record, I believe this is sheet SP-1.20, which is titled site plan. So, Mr. Mitchell, can you just give the board some background about the existing site improvements and operation, just to set the table for what's out there currently?
Sure. Yeah, the existing site's a fully developed site. It was developed and intended for a waste hauling fleet, and is the current use. The facility consists of a large area to the north being towards the top of the page here, towards the northeast, which is predominantly truck parking for waste hauling trucks. There are two primary buildings. There's one to the west towards the property line, which is the primary truck maintenance building with a small two-story office on the south side, the street-facing side. There's a second building, which is for more of maintenance of I call them haul-off bins, the bins that go to more commercial sites, and welding and that type of repair on those types of equipment. Overall, the facility on all sides is pretty heavily buffered. There's a significant berm on the street side to the south, and heavily planted and well-established trees all the way around the site, making the site virtually invisible from the street. The only, and I think the planner will probably talk more to that, but the only real vantage point for seeing into the site is the actual entry driveway, which is about at the center of the south side of the property. The existing fleet, they currently have 37 trucks. The maximum that they've seen at this site is just under 70 trucks. The proposed fueling and stalls for fueling is 36 trucks, which will be sufficient for the foreseeable future for the fleet for fueling when they transition to CNG. The larger shaded blue area towards the front or the south side of the drawing, bottom of the drawing, is an area earmarked for the CNG equipment, which is necessary to condition the gas for fueling.
Okay, yeah, can you explain, I guess, just how that would, how the gas connection comes from the existing roadway, lateral, and then I guess explain the treatment, how the gas is treated and conditioned so that it can be utilized in the trucks, and explain how it's conveyed to the trusses?
Sure. So compressed natural gas is literally just that. It's natural gas that comes from the gas utility, from New Jersey Gas. This system will simply tie into the existing gas utility service main in the street, just like you would for a house or a commercial building. It'll have a dedicated gas service that flows the equipment compound that I mentioned. At that point, what happens is there's an electrically driven compressor, which takes the gas, which is delivered at a relatively low pressure, and compresses that to a pressure that's suitable for storage on the vehicle. Along the way, there is a gas dryer, which effectively strips moisture from that gas stream so that when it goes to the trucks, it's cleaner and there's no moisture to contaminate or corrode or cause blockages in the system. A kind of a side portion of this is there's a small amount of storage that after the gas is compressed, they put a small amount in storage. And the reason for that is that on occasion, they'll have a truck that comes back to be refueled at the middle of the day. Typically, they end up being there right around their lunchtime. At that point, that small amount of storage is actually used to top off that vehicle quickly.
Excuse me, I hate to interrupt.
Uh-huh.
Excuse me. I did lose the audio feed for a second. I need the witness to go back to the statement where he was saying kind of a side portion of this. There's a small amount of storage that after the gas is compressed, they put a small amount in storage. And then from there, the audio is lost.
Okay, Fran, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so the small amount of storage is held in reserve for vehicles that might come back during the middle of the day and need a quick refill to go back out and complete their daily runs.
Got it. And this is something that's relatively routine in your representation and involvement with waste management, correct? I mean, this is at a number of sites already throughout the country as something that waste management does, and it's part of their initiative, correct?
Yes, this system and the equipment we're using is very common. It's a well-established industry. Compressed natural gas has been used for over 100 years now.
Right. And so in that regard, it's somewhat, a tested design. It's been refined over the experience and implementation at other sites, and that you've found that this operates efficiently and effectively for its proposed use.
That is correct.
Okay. And I guess if Vina, if you wouldn't mind going to the next sheet, which I believe is the detail sheet. I think it's marked as sheet P-2.11, which is what we're looking at now. And I think this orientation is a little different. So what we're seeing on the left-hand side of the screen is actually towards the frontage of the roadway. I guess, Tom, can you just point out some of what the equipment is and the safety features and protection from the rest of the site?
Sure. So as I said before, natural gas is brought into the site underground from the utility or the street, which in this drawing is on the left. The gas meter is shown just inside the left side of the page. And then the gas is conveyed. There's a horizontal line down the center of the page, or across the center of the page, that connects to the large box in the middle. The large box is actually the compressors, or the compressor skid, which has the electrically driven compressor that I mentioned before. It has a second compressor as well, which is a redundant piece of equipment. Reason being, the next closest place to fuel these vehicles is a number of towns away. So if it did go down for maintenance, the second one gives them the opportunity to not actually miss their commitments for waste hauling and picking up trash for the community. The gas dryer is also housed on that one skid. The small amount of storage that I mentioned is the round circle to the right. And that sits between a control valve panel, which just helps to automatically direct flow of fuel. And to the right is a control panel for defueling and the quick fill post for those trucks that might come in the middle of the day. The defueling system is simply that. If there's a situation where they need to do maintenance which requires the truck to be emptied, physically emptied, the defueling system will allow them to connect that truck back into the system and draw down all the fuel out of that truck without any of it being released to atmosphere.
And Vina, would you mind moving to the next plan sheet, which is SP-1.30 for the record? What you're looking at is the overhead trusses is what we call it, and that is what the vehicles that are coming in for refueling would park underneath, and that's the apparatus that would convey the fuel and hook up to the vehicle. Correct, Mr. Mitchell?
That's correct. Its primary function is to convey the fuel to the vehicles in their park stalls.
Right, and that's an accessory structure with, I believe the height is about, overall is about a 22-foot height. And I believe the review letter states that for an accessory structure that height is permitted in the zone. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's my understanding from the review.
Okay. And just for if the board members, if it's their pleasure, we do have some representative photos that we can share either now or later, if that's, oh, and here is one. Here, so
I guess they're now.
they're now, okay. These are obviously not the site, the existing site, these are at other locations, but that is what the truss does look like. Tom, can you tell us where, I guess, just where this location is that we're looking at?
Yes, this location is Camden. It's Camden, New Jersey. It was just commissioned about 4 months ago.
Just so the record's clear, this was also a photograph that I think was part of the submission. You know what, just for the record, let's mark this one A1, if you don't mind.
Sure, and just for consistency with what we uploaded it as, I believe we called it overhead truss representative photo.
That's fine.
Okay. And then, Vina, do you want to flip back to the other one that I think you're highlighting? And then this was a representative photo from another site as well. I believe that we called this skid photo in our submission. And Tom, can you just tell us what, I guess we'll mark this as A2?
Let's mark this as A2. That's fine.
Okay. And Tom, what location is this at?
This is Rochester, New Hampshire. It was early during construction. This site is actually being commissioned next week.
Okay, but this is representative of what the equipment that would be placed on the skid at this location would be as well, right?
Yes.
Okay.
A3?
Yeah,
Yep.
let's mark this A3.
And this was another perspective. I believe we called this skid photo number 2, a representative skid photo number 2. It's just another perspective of the equipment that you saw in the last exhibit. So Tom, I'm just going to refer now to the engineering and planning review letter dated June 16th, 2020. And there are a number of comments that are in the review letter, and I'd like to just walk through and address some of them with you here. And one of the comments was relating to bicycle racks, and that was something that would require a waiver. Can you advise the board if there are any bike racks on the site? And if there aren't, have you had discussions with the applicants, and are you aware of if any of the employees actually, travel to work on foot or by bike?
I actually asked the facility manager that question just this week. There is not an existing bike rack, and he doesn't have any employees that actually have ridden a bike to work or asked or stated any interest in that. I don't believe that they would have an objection to adding one, but he felt that it would go unused.
Okay, and I guess a point to the comment in the review letter then would be, we would be happy to work with the professionals to provide a bike rack if that's the board's pleasure, but Since this is not a retail or commercial site, this is really just for the employees to come and pick up their vehicles. We're asking for that waiver in this application. But again, if it's recommended by the planner and engineer, we would be happy to accommodate that one. The next item I wanted to just highlight was about the parking area. Tom, the existing parking is gravel, correct?
Yes, it's predominantly gravel.
And that was approved as part of the prior variance approval?
Yes, it was.
And the applicant's intention is to keep it as gravel for the foreseeable future. However, there could be plans to return on an amended application to seek permission to pave it.
That's correct.
Again, I guess another comment related to loading. There's no loading zone per se called out. This was identified as the deviation in the planning and engineering review letter. It was previously approved without a loading area. We are, again, I guess, asking for continued waiver or variance relief from that item, because again, this is not there's not deliveries that you would expect consistent with a commercial or retail site. Is that correct, Tom?
That's correct.
I'm now referring to on page 7 of the review letter, sidewalks. This is also called out as a deviation request requiring relief. The existing site doesn't have sidewalks, but that's consistent with the prior approval. And as the planning review letter points out, it could be considered to be added at the time when the paving occurs. Tom, is there any current proposal to have sidewalks installed at this time?
Not at this time.
Okay. But we would be willing to consider it in a future application.
Yes.
Now, perhaps the most significant item in the review letter, at least in my opinion, was the landscaping comments. I think ultimately the conclusion drawn by the planning and engineering review letter was that at a minimum, they'd like to see the outdoor equipment be screened with some landscaping to screen it from the roadway. Tom, can you just talk about the location that's proposed, and if that location could be changed to maybe take it out of the view from the public right-of-way, or alternatively, could you provide some landscaping to meet these comments?
Yeah, I think we'd be willing to work with staff to look at landscaping. The actual location was placed just to the south of just to the east of the entry driveway, which, number one, from looking directly from the street is 100% buffered and obscured by the existing berm and the established trees there. I think if you could see it, it's probably going to be just a glimpse diagonally through the driveway. The placement there was essentially picked because since it is right next to the driveway, it's also that driveway also acts as the fire lane for the site, making that ideal if there was ever a reason to respond to a fire or any other kind of need. However, the space to the right right now is simply used for storage. If it was the board's intention to completely obscure it from the street, I think the suggestion might be to move this to the right, which is east on the site, to move it further from that driveway.
So I guess at this point, I would ask, Vina or Nicole, if what's, their, as far as their professional standpoint, would it be a preference to move it, slide it over to the right on the site plan here, or to leave it where it is and maybe add some screening on that corner?
I mean, I would suggest to move it to the right, only because if you see, the driveway is right here, so adding landscaping in front or blocking it is really not uh, physically possible. If you push it back and then have some landscape screening, then it might work. The issue is the original, I mean, you're asking for a conditional use variance wherein other variances are kind of assumed. But this is the EDO 1 zone. Originally, the purpose of the EDO 1 zone was to have like retail commercial activity, which directly caters to the neighboring residents. Now, with this use obviously doesn't fall into that category. So there are a number of variances that were generated and for which you were already in front of the zoning board in the past. I just feel that it's an accessory structure. Our ordinance does not allow accessory structures in the front yard. It's usually in the rear yard or the side yard. If there is a way that we can move it away, and so that it's less visible, then it really alleviates any negative impacts, visual negative impacts that are created. I'm sorry, I think I lost that.
I heard you.
No, I think I lost the image.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Yes. So unless Nicole has a different opinion. Nicole?
No, Vina, I agree with you. I mean, I think, especially if the space is available to the east or to the right of the location that it's at now, I think it's an easy ask for the applicant to just shift it over so we could avoid that view as we come down Route 34.
Correct.
I think we could work with you and come up with a location moving that to the right.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Okay. I guess, Tom, I'm just going to move along for the moment to, there was a number of site plan comments on page 8, number 8 in the review letter. Would you be, or are you willing to stipulate to make those changes to the plans?
Yes.
Number 9 in the review letter on page 9 relates to any anticipated traffic impacts. I think I said at the outset that the number of vehicles overall in the waste hauling fleet is not anticipated to change. It's just the phasing in of the new, cleaner burning trucks over a period of time. And that in that regard, we wouldn't expect any additional trips or negative traffic impacts at the site. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. They're especially given the current COVID and economic issues, they're not anticipating any growth, anything of any significance for the foreseeable future.
And then I guess the next comment under that section, comment B, talks about the striping, delineating the spaces. Now, on an ordinary commercial or retail site, you want to call those out very clearly for patrons that are visiting and invitees. But here, the people visiting the site are employees who are there day in and day out. In that regard, the employee parking area, it seems to have been functioning over the last decade or two, really, without issue or without, the pavement and striping. Is that accurate?
That's correct. Yeah, my understanding and from memory of the site, they do have wheel stops which somewhat delineate the stalls, but because it's gravel, it's any striping would wash away with the first rain.
Right.
Yeah.
And with respect to the fueling area for the waste hauling vehicles, does the truss system in a way delineate the area that each truck will fill up because of where the hose is located, et cetera? I mean, is that something that's obvious to the drivers where they're supposed to go?
Yes, it is. The way that they currently operate is actually very similar in that the truck parking areas are well established for the operation. Each one actually is numbered. So the truck is assigned to a specific stall.
Okay.
The driver takes it out of that stall in the morning, and that's the one he puts it back into.
So it's very routine.
Very routine. With the overhead truss, it goes one step further in that the hoses are actually located to drop between the trucks, effectively delineating the space. You park the truck in between the hose drops. The stalls are also numbered the same way they are now. So it's very clear. It's clearly delineated with the overhead truss system.
Now, I know, we're going to hear from our planner and there's a number of variances, but in your professional opinion as an engineer, do the benefits of the clean fuel and the replacement of the diesel vehicles, does that benefit outweigh any impacts to the site or the adjoining properties that might be negative in any way?
In my opinion, it would be a positive impact overall. The very significant reduction in both particulate and other pollutants that the natural gas vehicles produce as these vehicles operate both here and in the neighborhood. Also, these operate much quieter. These are more along the lines of a internal combustion engine, like a normal car or truck, whereas the existing diesel trucks have a much louder operating engine.
Thank
So
you.
overall, very positive.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think that kind of covers my basic questions for Mr. Mitchell. Of course, he's available to respond to any questions of the board, or, I would happily be able to recall him if there's any other questions that come up during our planning testimony.
Well, thank you, Mr. Sardo. Our normal course of protocol would be I would ask our professionals first if they have any questions at this point, and then I would go to our boards. So I'll start with Ms. Shapiro.
Mr. Chairman, I have no comments other than from what I heard, the comments that I had specifically made as regard to site and traffic, 8 and 9 were going to be addressed by the applicant's engineer. The only thing I would add is there is what looks to be disturbance within DOT's right of way. So I would ask that in my list of outside agencies in the report, I failed to mention that NJDOT probably highway occupancy permit would be required for that disturbance within DOT right away. I asked that be made a condition of approval too. Well, actually, during resolution compliance, we would require that prior to the signing of the final plan. So,
can I just respond to Tom? I believe that you've already been in contact with NJ Natural Gas and regarding the permits for road opening, and that it was your understanding that they coordinated that with the agencies?
Yes, it's the utility companies, the one that will be installing that line from their existing main in the street, and they agreed to take full responsibility for any and all permitting related to bringing that to the meter location on site.
okay.
But certainly we stipulate that any required outside agency approval that we would get it, including if the NJ Natural Gas tells us that further permitting is required on our part for that work.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that's it.
Mr. Berry, you satisfied that all your comments have been addressed and met?
Yes, and I'm happy that they're agreeing to move it over. I do agree with Nina that, especially because it's right at the entrance, it is visible, and I would appreciate that the applicant is willing to move it over. So, yeah, no further questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Sawant?
Yes, so I think I just want to go back to the waivers. On page 5 of our memo, there's a list of waivers, but I noticed that there will be an addition, which is on page 8, section 250-74C2K. You would need a waiver from that as well. So that needs to be added to the list. And then the bike racks is already in there. I think with the landscaping, it's a requirement of our code that if you have more than 20 parking spaces, then you have to meet these design standards. In this particular case, the site is fully developed. What they're doing is just switching, they're adding the CNG facility. So I would support the waivers, except for when you move the outdoor equipment area, I would recommend that they work with the planning office to come up with some landscape screening around that area. But other than that, I think I am good. My biggest concern was the equipment area being visible, and that has been addressed. So I think I'm good.
And the landscape that was spoken about, you guys will come to some agreement on this one?
Yes, during the compliance plan review.
Thank you. Anything else?
That's it.
Mr. Sachs?
Yeah, just in terms of the waivers, I just want to make sure as well, the sidewalk, actually, I think we have it listed as a variance. That's fine. That's a continuing, that was something that was granted at the prior approval. So, no, I'm fine, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any issues with the testimony at this point.
We'll go to the board members. Before I do, I have one question.
Who's that?
What's that? Kim, is it something you want to say?
No, I just was saying that Fire Marshal Tom Garrity is in.
Oh, we're going to get to him too. For the benefit of the board members and for the benefit of all the people who are watching, Mr. Mitchell, could you explain who actually handles now the fueling of the trucks? Is it a certified person? Is it one person, or can it just be the driver? How does that work?
Yeah, the drivers are actually trained to fuel their trucks. They're the only ones that are allowed to do it is the on-site staff, either a driver or a maintenance mechanic who's also trained, obviously, to not only fuel but maintain the vehicle.
Okay, so they're going to be certified or trained at the very minimum on how to handle the CNG, right?
Yes, Waste Management has a pretty rigorous training program. They actually go quite a bit beyond what's called for by the federal OSHA standards. It is called out by OSHA as far as what those minimum training standards are.
Okay, I thought maybe you might get a question like that when we go to the public, so I thought if you put it on the record now, it might solve that. Mr. Scogno, I saw your hand up. We'll start on your end of the day.
Thank you, Chairman. The hours of operation, Mr. Mitchell, for the fueling?
So the trucks typically leave the yard early in the morning and get back mid to late afternoon. The fueling typically starts as the trucks come back. So typically it would start after 4 p.m. And I say that with some qualification because depending on the electric costs for running the compressors, if there's an advantage to shifting that and actually starting slightly later to get a lower rate and not burden the utility, they often would start at 5 or 6 when that utility rate changes.
So 4 p.m. till?
So with this site, with this equipment, they would probably be operating typically until about 10
p.m.?
10 p.m. There, on occasion, there might be a equipment malfunction, which would require them to start and fill the trucks at a later time, but that's typically what we see.
Yeah, because I noticed on the exhibit, I think it was exhibit 2 on the truss, there was only lighting at one end and the other lighting was at the other end, nothing in the center.
Actually, the photo didn't show it very well. One of the advantages to the overhead truss is it gives us the opportunity to actually mount lights physically right between the trucks in what would be the walking aisle between the trucks. And that truss actually has a floodlight or yard light at either end, primarily because we want to make sure that we have good lighting where the trucks are maneuvering around the end of the truss and driving around the trucks. We also have lights in between each pair of trucks. So every walking aisle between the truck has a smaller, but a light that illuminates that area for ease of inspection of equipment, also for safety.
Okay, I thank you very much.
Mr. Flip, anything? No, Mr. Connor, anything? Mr. Dewhurst?
No.
Okay, Mr. Walker?
Absolutely.
Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Mitchell, what type of fixed fire protection will be available at this location now?
So these facilities are actually built with continuous flame detection and continuous video camera surveillance of the entire fueling area and the equipment area. The fire flame detectors that we put in actually aren't a code requirement. That's above and beyond that Waste Management does as a policy. If there is any detection of flame, the entire system is designed to shut down and actually shut the gas line stop flow at the utility meter at the street or as where it comes up out of the ground at the compounds. It shut down all the equipment and a signal is sent to a UL listed emergency call center. There at each column throughout the fueling area, we have manual push button, emergency stop push buttons. If there's any cause for concern of one of the operators, they can push one of those and it again shuts the entire system down. Fire extinguishers at required intervals that we establish, based on the code and work on with the fire authority.
Okay. Should one of the drivers forget to disconnect his fill hose, what type of safety features are incorporated in that so that the fuel doesn't dump out continuously?
Right. So each hose is equipped with a breakaway coupling. If the driver did forget to, well, there's two things. One is if the driver forgot to disconnect, these trucks actually come from the factory pre-wired with a interlock that monitors and will not let them start the vehicle. Coupled with that, if there was a vehicle that's for some reason that malfunctioned and it was able to start, the hose itself has a breakaway coupling in it. If the vehicle drove off with the hose, it would break at that fitting and relieve a very small amount of fuel that's in that breakaway and stop.
That fitting was kind of typical to the ones that are on our gasoline pumps.
It is actually the same function. Yeah.
Okay. Will there be a new or some sort of evacuation plan now that this CNG system is going in for the employees?
Yes, the facility has an evacuation plan now, which will be amended when this is built.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Mr. Stoner, anything?
Yes, I have a question for Mr.
Go right ahead.
Mr. Mitchell, as far as the training is concerned, the certification, how many hours do they put in? Or is there a test for it? Can you explain a little bit more about that?
as far as the training that happens, depending on what the employees do, whether they're mechanics, overhead managers, or truck drivers, the training will vary. But generally, as truck drivers, they get I believe it's a full day orientation, both on trucks and safe operations of the vehicles and the fuel systems as it pertains to them. I cannot speak to how often they do refresher training. I could find out, but I'm not sure of that. They also, as a matter of course, when they install one of these systems, one of the first things they do is invite the local fire chief and local fire station team that would be most likely to respond to an emergency at the site to come in, and they have both a video training and on-site training, depending on. We're all getting a little creative with COVID right now and doing a lot more video, but they're working with the fire departments to familiarize them and help them understand what the hazards are and how to respond.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stoner. Mr. Sikowski. Nothing. Okay. Fire Marshal Garrity, I don't see you on the screen, but I know you're here somewhere. Maybe not. Kim, is Mr. Garrity on?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay. All right. Mr. Walker actually asked two of the questions I was going to ask, so I have nothing further at this time.
Okay. Satisfactory to your conceptually to you at this point?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Tom. I know you have another witness, Mr. Sardo. I just want to say something to the public, and then I'm going to ask the court reporter if she'd like a break, because we started at 8:02. So I don't know how long she can go without a break, but I want to tell the public at home right now, this was the first witness. There's going to be a second. As I explained to you earlier, you may have questions. The man you just listened to, his name is Tom Mitchell. He's a professional engineer. He explained how things work. If you have a question for him, please write it down now. We're going to flash up the call-in number probably during the next witness. And certainly if we have a recess, it'll be up. Right, as I told you, write your information down. He was a professional engineer. If you have questions for him at a later point. You will not get to ask questions until the second witness has finished, and that is a professional planner. We'll follow the same protocol. Our professionals might ask some questions, our attorney might ask questions, and our board members may ask questions. At that point, I would ask Mr. Sardo if he's willing. We're going to open up a public portion, and we'll hear from those at home. So please write your information down now. And that was Mr. Tom Mitchell. He's a professional engineer. Mr. Sardo, with your consideration, I'm going to ask Ms. DeBella if she'd like to take a break. Ms. DeBella?
No, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to break.
You're
I'd like
sure?
to finish. Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
All right, Mr. Sardo, we're back to you. Go right ahead.
Okay, and hopefully we can get through this a little more quickly than the engineering. I'd like to call Barbara Elin of Beacon Planning to give the planning testimony in support of the variances and waivers.
Ms. Eland, please raise your right hand. I'll swear you in. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I do.
Please state your name, spelling your last name, professional affiliation for the record.
My name is Barbara Allen. My last name is spelled E-H-L-E-N, and I'm a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey and an AICP.
Thank you.
Want a qualifier, Mr. Sardo?
Yes. Barbara, can you, I know you just mentioned you're licensed as an AICP in the state of New Jersey. Do you want to also just mention, have you appeared before boards in the state of New Jersey and or this board before and been qualified as an expert?
Yeah, let me go through the spiel.
Thank you.
My name is Barbara Allen. I'm a licensed professional planner. I've worked at Beacon Planning since 2000. I have my undergraduate degree from Binghamton University and my MBA from Monmouth University. As I said, I worked from Beacon Planning from 2008 and I've worked my way up to project manager. I've been certified or been accepted as an expert in a number of towns, including, let's say, Red Bank, Long Branch, Ocean Township, Neptune.
Ms. Seelan, we accept your credentials and we accept your expertise.
Thank you. If you mind if I just kind of dig right in?
Please do.
So we recognize the site. If you wouldn't mind putting up the exhibit.
So, Vina, this would be the, there's a PDF of several photos.
Here we go. So we'll start with our this is just giving you a general feel of the area.
And there, Mr. Sachs, do we want to mark this as A4?
Yeah, well, yeah, let's mark this as A4. I agree, yeah.
It's just one document.
Yeah, that's fine, that's fine.
Okay.
All right, we're first looking at a property aerial. And what I want to bring your attention to is actually along the Route 34 frontage. You can see there's a well-established landscaping buffer in this area that is proposed to remain. If we scroll down, I'm sorry. Can someone scroll down just to the next photo?
Thank you.
So this is actually looking towards the site. This is the eastern frontage along Route 34. And again, it's just showcasing that a buffer was established in anticipation of this use. Remains. Additionally, if you go down, yes, further, buffer. This is looking towards the site. Entrance is actually in the distance. And this is the western portion of the frontage along Route 34. Finally, oh, not finally, this is the entrance, which is actually the only portion of the site that you can see from the roadway. The rest is landscaped. This is what your view would be if we wait here for a second. Going southbound, and where she's circling would be where the equipment was initially proposed, or we discussed moving it eastward.
Right. So Barbara, if we slid that back towards the right-hand side of the property, it would pretty quickly be obscured by the existing berm and buffering there, right? That's
correct. And if you scroll down one more photo, that's just showing the existing buffering along the rear where the trucks do park and are proposed to remain. Finally, this aerial, we kind of shot from Google Earth or Google Maps. And the distance that we believe you could see the opening is approximately 80 feet. The roadway is a 45-mile-per-hour speed limit. And we calculated that going southbound, your view of the interior would only be for about 3 seconds. So you'd have to actually be actively looking over to see it. That being said, we're still looking to shift everything eastward and work with the community on the landscaping to ensure that everyone is satisfied that the view is well buffered. If you want to just scroll to the top, so I just have an aerial, or if you just want to close out of the exhibits, I'll leave that. This we're asking for several variances. I guess our largest one, I would say, is our D3 conditional. So by including the CNG, we have effectively expanded the use on site, the conditional maintenance and repair use. Since we do not comply with all the standard use, specifically we're within 1,000 feet, another maintenance use, we trigger a D3 variance. Now a D3 variance is led by Coventry, which more on the deviation than on the use itself. So we look to see if the site can accommodate the deviation without negative impact, instead of looking at the use as the whole or as the entire site. So when we talk about positive criteria, as was previously mentioned, the natural gas operates at a more environmentally friendly manner than the diesel. And it's also quieter. So the impact of this use to the neighborhood is actually decreased by the conversion to natural gas. If we look at the standard that we failed to meet, which is we're within 1,000 feet of a Napa store. I'll note that, yes, we do have vehicle repair on site, but it's not necessarily what was envisioned by the ordinance, as this is private. There's no public access to the vehicle repair on this site. And also the Napa is more of a parts store than it is necessarily a repair facility. With respect to negative criteria, I do not see any. The proposed natural gas is not going to result in any additional traffic, crash. It'll actually decrease noise. And so I think it presents a better opportunity for this site. When we go through these, we also look at the community's master plan, which I reviewed. If you give me 1 second to go through my notes. The 2011 master plan, one of the noted goals is to ensure that plan types and intensities of development are suitable for and compatible with existing development patterns and appropriate in terms of minimizing environmental impact and maximizing environmental sustainability. So the community's already found that this site is suitable for this use and also suitable for the accessory use of refueling. So the applicant is still proposing that same accessory use, albeit differently configured. And also the master plan also speaks to strive towards maintaining a desirable balance of housing and jobs within the municipality. So you have a stable commercial use within the town that is seeking to upgrade its operations and provide a better alternative to diesel while maintaining maintaining the rateable base and the job in the community. We can also look to the municipal land use law. And I would argue that the application furthers A, to encourage municipal action to guide the appropriate use and development of all lands in the state in a manner which would promote the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. As has been mentioned numerous times, the transition to CNG represents an improvement to the existing diesel fleet thanks to reduced emissions and their quieter nature. I would say G, to provide sufficient space in appropriate locations for a variety of agricultural, residential, recreational, commercial, and industrial uses in open space, both public and private, according to the respective environmental requirements in order to meet the needs of all New Jersey citizens. As I've noted, that this space previously received use variance approval and was found to be appropriate for this use. Finally, to M, to encourage coordination of the various public and private procedures and activities shaping land development with a view of lessening the cost of such development and the more efficient use of land. So this site already exists. So we're just proposing to upgrade an existing facility so that it continues to meet the needs of an established business within the community. When we look to the other variances we are requesting, they include landscape area ratio of 0.19, whereas a minimum landscape ratio of 0.4 is required. This was previously granted, and we're proposing to continue the same. Loading zone requires one space where 0 are provided. Again, this is an existing condition we're proposing to remain. Sidewalks between buildings where none are proposed. This is an existing condition. Again, this isn't a site that's open to the public. This is more, frankly, employees coming, dropping off their car and hopping into their truck and leaving. There are a few office staff that remain on site all day. But the operation of the site has been established and it has functioned since inception. There's also the bulk variance requesting the establishment of the equipment within the front yard. As was stated, I would argue that this is a better zone, location for it due to accessibility in case of emergency, and also it respects the established circulation pattern. And additionally, the landscaping effectively shields it from view. This is not necessarily the same as, I will get as a public space where people will come in and look over to the right and say, oh my God, what's that equipment? It's actually just a functional space for everyone to come in, pick up their trucks, do their office work, and leave. We are requesting several waivers. The first one, bench trashes and receptacles, and bike racks. As we heard, they can be provided on site, but they probably would lay fallow, and they would just kind of occupy space on the site to fulfill a requirement. So I'm sure the applicant would be willing to work with the community if it was really desired, but I would argue that it would impede the functionality of the site as it exists. Landscaping, as was previously stated, is a fully developed site, and it's continued. No changes or footprints of the building or anything like that, and so we would offer, as we have offered, to work with the community in establishing landscaping proposed to the equipment. But otherwise, I would argue that the established landscaping is sufficient to buffer the use as it already is buffering the use.
Right, so part of we're asking for those waivers, but as a condition of any approval that would be granted, we're also acknowledging that we'll work with the professionals to provide some additional landscaping as they deem appropriate in compliance.
Yes. And then finally, the gravel parking area, as was discussed, is an established situation that is proposed to remain and has functioned on site. With respect to the negative criteria with these, I believe typically they are subsumed more with the use variance, but as a reiteration, the community as a whole benefits by the conversion of this fleet from diesel to natural gas, not only for the lower emissions, but also for the noise. Therefore, it is my opinion that the benefits outweigh the detriments.
And in your professional opinion as a planner, you believe that the board is vested with the power under the MLUL and the ordinances to grant the relief requested?
Yes.
Thank you.
May I answer any questions?
Okay,
Did I speak too fast?
Ms. Sawant?
Actually, I do not have any questions. I just want to add the variance for the sidewalk between the buildings and the paved areas. I think it's a new variance. I believe the board should vote on it because when this application previously came in, I believe it was a different zone, and then it was changed to EDO 1 later. So I believe the board should take a vote on that. Along with the location for the accessory structures. But other than that, I have no questions.
Okay, thank you. So it's to your satisfaction, or at least what the planner has presented has covered all your areas of concern.
Yes, like my memo said, I think the very fact that they're moving to natural gas serves as a positive criteria for any variances that are sought. And in terms of negative criteria, the applicant has agreed to move the outdoor equipment area, provide any landscape screening that will be required to screen it off from public view. So I think I'm satisfied.
Thank you very much. Ms. Shapiro?
Mr. Chairman, I have no comments. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Garrity, anything of the planner?
Sir, I'm good.
Thank you. Who am I missing? How about Mr. Sachs?
Mr. Chairman, I'm fine. I'm satisfied with the testimony.
Okay. And I'll go with my board from left to right. Mr. Scogno says no. Mr. Duff? Nothing. Mr. Connor? Nothing. Okay. Mr. Dukers?
Nope.
Nope. Mr. Walker? Yeah, take your mute off, Bruce. You're muted.
Will we have some chance for commentary before the vote?
Yes.
And I'll reserve my comments before the vote.
Okay, very good. Mr. Stoner, anything of the planner?
No, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Psychowski?
No questions.
No questions. Okay, that's probably the extent of your witnesses, correct, sir?
Yes, that is, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Bruce, you want to wait until I go to the public, right? Before you make any comments?
Yeah, that'll be fine.
Okay, yeah, not a problem. Could we put up, Ms. Sawant, the phone number at this point? Mr. Sardi, you have nothing else under direct, right?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Why don't we put up the sign for a couple of minutes? Do we have any waiting calls, by the way?
There's nobody in the queue.
Okay, I just want to remind everyone, those of you who are watching at home or watching on YouTube or on cable, this is matter number 11-2020Z in front of the zoning board. This is to allow Waste Management, which is located on Route 34, basically to install compressed natural gas to fuel their trucks and thereby getting rid of diesel fuel. Obviously, this takes a little bit of time to switch over, but this is what they're here for. And if you have something that you want to say about this, I'm going to ask you to call now. I need the phone numbers you see on your screen. If you do call, please, when you're recognized, state your name, then the attorney would have to swear you in. Why don't we give it about a minute and see if anyone calls, please?
There are no callers at this point. Chairman, we have no callers.
No callers.
We have no callers.
No.
Okay. Obviously, that no one has called at this point. I will close the public portion. I'm going to come back to the board for any final comments, and then, of course, I'll let Mr. Sardo have the last comments. Mr. Walker, you wanted to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Speaking as the fire chief who has to respond to emergency calls for this site, we've been there in the past. And the housekeeping at that site leaves a lot to be desired. The truck parking, the way the trucks are parked, one right next to the other, when there's a truck fire there, it's usually more than one truck. It's usually multiple trucks. Now I've got to contend with fighting a natural gas fires instead of a diesel fuel fire. I would much rather fight a diesel fuel fire than a natural gas fire. I'm not very happy with, because of the First Friends is right next door. Now I've got to be worried about, should there be an incident, where is that cloud going to go? Because natural gas is lighter than air, so it pushes all around. So is it going to get pushed into First Friends? Is it going to get pushed north, south, east, west? Should there be some sort of an incident there? I just don't see this as being a good location for this. Due to the power lines that go across the front of that driveway, I'm not able to use my tower ladder should I need large volumes of water to get in there to extinguish a fire because of the power lines and transit on the poles. So as far as I'm concerned, I cannot support this application as a fireman and put my guys, in peril, because now I have a totally different material that I have to deal with.
Okay, anything else, sir?
That's it.
Okay, thank you very much for your commentary. And finally, any other member of the board? Just raise your hand. I can see all of your faces right now. Okay. All right, seeing none, Mr. Sardo, I'll give you the last word.
Sure. I guess just a question, I guess, if I may. I did get the fire prevention letter from Tom Gary, the fire marshal. I guess I'm just a little surprised at the comments that I was just hearing for the first time, which seems to be contradictory to his letter. Certainly I'm happy to, I guess I would want to poll the board before they vote after that kind of very strong commentary after what I thought was a pretty successful presentation. And if they call the board and there's significant questions about the safety, I'd like a chance to address them before, getting us what I would consider to be a surprise vote based on that commentary.
Oh, well, absolutely. I would agree with you. And if you would like to put something more on as far as a safety issue, I don't listen, Mr. Sardo, I'll be honest with you. I don't know how the board is ever going to vote. Neither do you. Neither do any of us. I know that CNG is used pretty much countrywide. I think New Jersey Transit uses it on a lot of their buses. I can't say that I'm that well educated on it as to whether diesel fuel is safer. Mr. Walker makes a point, but I don't know whether I necessarily agree with it. As far as the fueling station, I would assume that there are safety measures. We've heard about the breakaway. We've heard about the interlocking device. I don't know. Perhaps he knows more about how many times this has caused a problem with CNG. I do not know of any. So if you wish to take a quick recess and either have your planner or your engineer speak to safety matters, that'd be up to you.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think what Mr. Sardo is asking for is maybe just an informal poll of the board to see if if any other members have any concerns.
Oh, well,
along the same lines as Mr. Walker.
I've asked the board, each and every one of you to speak. And if you have a concern, in fairness to the applicant, please raise your concerns now so they can either address them or perhaps change something in their application. I don't have any concerns. I've made my comments as to what I feel. And if any other board member has an issue, particularly with safety, let's bring it up now in fairness to the applicant. We can or cannot, we don't have to take a vote, but why don't we, I'll go from left to right again. Mr. Scogno, you have anything you want to bring up? Ms. Kilduff, anything you want to bring up? Mr. Connor, anything you want to bring up? Mr. Dewhurst? No? Mr. Walker, anything else you want to add? You're
muted.
To answer Mr. Sardo's questions, the fire marshal's letter lists 4 different things: fire hydrant spacing, Knox box installation, fire lanes, and the dumpster location. Doesn't talk about fire suppression. That's my job. I'm the chief of the department. I handle the fire operations. So in his letter, it doesn't talk anything about fire suppression, just those 4 items.
Well, this actually is your district, correct, Mr. Walker?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I don't want to go out on a limb here. Larry, correct me if I'm saying something wrong. Would you and your officers like to meet with Mr. Sardo and his professionals prior to us taking a vote, or perhaps you could learn something and teach us something that we don't know, Bruce?
I mean, if it passes, then we'll definitely be at the training.
No, I'm just saying, prior to us taking a vote, do you find it necessary? Would you like to meet and with Mr. Garrity and yourself?
I don't think it's necessary.
Okay, Mr. Sachs, am I out on a limb here?
No. I mean, certainly it's a question to ask, and obviously, Mr. Walker wears 2 hats here as a board member and also, fire chief. So, but that's fine.
Well, with all due respect, Bruce, and I never thought of the things that you're saying, but as I say, I do know that it's used, and I haven't heard of issues, but obviously you're far more educated in that than I am. I'll bounce back to you, Mr. Sardo.
Well, actually, Jim, I think you got to ask Mr. Stoner or Mr. Sykowski.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't get Mr. Stoner, and I didn't get Mr. Sykowski. Mr. Stoner.
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead, sir.
I would like him to respond to what Mr. Walker had to say. I'm just curious to know, since he felt so strongly about his commentary, what he had to say.
Okay, well, we could probably have you call back up your engineer.
Yeah, I would like to do that because I think he'll be able to speak to his experience in helping this company implement this kind of a system throughout the country and what the experience has been at those locations with the concerns raised by Mr. Walker.
Okay, Mr. Sardo, hold on one second. In fairness to Mr. Stoner, is there anything, any more commentary you want to make?
No.
You just wanted some answers for that, right?
Yeah, sure. I would like to respond. to that.
And I'll go to Mr. Psychowski before we go to, back to the planner, back to the engineer, I should say.
I don't have any questions or concerns.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sardi, you want to bring him back up tonight? How do you want to handle it?
Yeah, I'd like to have them now.
Go right ahead.
Wait. That's up to Mr. Sardo. So, okay.
Well, no, I think he's
prepared to address it.
He's here.
Okay.
He's prepared to address it.
All right.
I'd like to have him.
Let's bring him up then. Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Stoner, I think you misheard me. I was saying Mr. Sardo.
Oh,
That's okay.
All right.
Albert, are you?
Is Mr. Mitchell still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great.
So John, should I just address it as I heard it?
Please do.
Okay. Yeah, so with number one, with trash trucks, whether they're diesel or natural gas, historically the biggest potential fire issue with them is actually not the fuel. It's historically been what they call bed fires. It's actually trash that's left in a truck. You know, if mixed trash is compressed, which it is in a waste hauler, and it's not emptied, it can slowly gather heat and eventually ignite. And that historically has been the number one cause of a trash truck fire. Where that normally occurs or manifests itself is in a facility that actually has either a trash waste facility where perhaps a truck forgets to empty the back of the truck before he parks at the fueling facility or in their normal parking spots, or at a transfer station where the same thing could happen. It's a combined facility that's got the waste removal or processing plant next to where the trucks normally park. This facility has an advantage. It's actually it does not have a transfer station or a waste facility on site. These trucks actually go to the waste facility and dump their loads before they come back in the evening to park. So they effectively eliminate or significantly reduce that potential hazard. As far as the fuel, natural gas has a few things that are inherently safer, in fact, than diesel or gasoline. Number one is it's not a liquid fuel. It's not, if you had a leak, it doesn't leak and spill and spread on the ground underneath other trucks. It's much lighter than air. The way the trucks are configured and the way that the tanks are placed and designed, they're actually designed to discharge vertically up and not out towards other trucks if there is a problem, even including being involved in a fire themselves, if that were to happen. They're actually designed to safely vent the fuel instead of exploding, instead of rupturing, instead of involving other trucks. In that way, it's actually a much safer configuration. The other thing is this type of facility. Number one, this is a small facility for waste management. I was at a facility last week that had 250 trucks lined up and fueling this way, and they've been doing it for 20 years. There's a couple of hundred others that I could point to. You know, this is the way that most of the industry does their fueling for these vehicles, and historically it's been a very effective and very safe way of doing it.
Thank you. Would you then characterize, the concerns expressed by Vice Chairman Walker as, certainly they're valid concerns and he has much experience, but in your experience, the operation of a natural gas system like this it's safe, efficient, and that all the design features have in fact been thought of in advance so that it can operate safely and efficiently on a site like this.
I would agree with that. I'd also point out that the site is effectively broken up into smaller areas. There's two small areas of parking and fueling, completely separate from the equipment area, meaning that if there was something involved, it wouldn't involve the entire facility. It would effectively be isolated, and we'd want to work with fire to make sure that they're comfortable with our fire lanes and access, so that they were comfortable with that.
Okay, so you would also stipulate, if the board were to approve this, to not only meet the conditions contained in the fire prevention review letter, but also to invite the fire department and the vice chairman to any trainings, so that he could be involved in that and be comfortable with what was going on at the site.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I think that concludes my redirect on that.
Okay, I did hear you say at the beginning, I thought at the beginning of the testimony this evening, that it's quite common, or perhaps it was Mr. Mitchell, that officials are brought in when these systems are completed. Did I not hear one of the two you say that, in order to, be on the same page, as it were, with the fire companies and the fire marshal?
Yes, that is true. As a matter of fact, we just held a meeting with both state and local fire marshals for the Rochester project, which I think I mentioned is one of the photos that we shared is actually being commissioned next week. So we do that as a matter of course.
I thought that's what you had said earlier. Mr. Mitchell, do you know of any other CNG plants, I should say CNG dispensaries in this area?
Toms River, Camden.
And those are your plants, but I'm saying as a whole, sir, do you know on the outside market that other truck fleets are using them? Or,
aside from waste management, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Republic Services, which is another waste hauler, uses them. Many cities use them. Baltimore has one right at the airport. Atlanta has one right at their airport. They're numerous.
This is the more cleaner fuels that people are going to.
For this size vehicle, it is the cleanest option.
Okay, and that's why I'm assuming the bus fleet of New Jersey Transit is going to that as well, right?
That's correct.
Okay, Mr. Garrity, would you? I'd like you to weigh in if you could, sir, if you're still there.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I am.
Okay, listen, Bruce brings up some good points, Tom, and I'd like to hear from you, and I think the applicant would like to hear from you.
Yes, he does, and I do agree with the chief. However, like he said, he talks about his purview, and I do mine. As being an ex-chief myself, I certainly did consider the daycare that's in close proximity, however, to the other side of the property. I did note the back of the auto parts store being significantly close, and when you move that, move the product area closer to that building, that does raise some concerns. However, I do understand if you move it 10 feet, you're not going to do anything, give or take, as far as I could see, for the street frontage. Fire departments do like to have an open area to get in and attack where they have to. But in this kind of application around that type of gas, typically it's more of a stand back-ish and put large hose streams onto it if you have to. But other than that, the code it does require a lot of extra safety features. It has come a long way in the last couple of years. They are getting more and more around the state. And And that's really all I have to say at this point.
Okay, and Fire Marshal, you issued a report on it, right?
Yes, sir, I did.
What did you conclude?
I had them put in the hydrant in the front of the property a couple of years ago. That was one of our biggest things, along with opening up some of that roadway that goes through the center of the property. And the chief is also right that we've had a number of fires there, I would say 4 or 5 in the last couple of years. And our concern always is how close they are parked together, as well as the one thing I did think about is if they fill from the front or from the back of the vehicle. However, it really doesn't matter because either way, you could have an incident where the trash coming from the back, usually off the tailpiping or the stack, could ignite materials that are on the truck. That's the type of fires we usually see. We've been there a couple times in the last couple of years, like I said, and that's just generally good housekeeping that stops that type of thing.
Okay, I don't know the answer to that, but do you want to know if they fill from the back? It sounded like on the sides, but.
Yes, I'd like to hear it. Do they fill mostly from the cab area or from the back? Where is their fill point at?
Okay. Mr. Sardo, you're gonna go to the.
Yeah, Mr. Mitchell can answer this.
Okay.
Yeah, so like you said, the trucks have come a long ways. As part of that, they actually have provisions where they can order the trucks with different configurations. They could fuel from the front, the back, or the cab, the driver's side of the cab. The standard trucks, which are more what this facility will be getting, they have a fuel port on the front bumper, and they have a fuel port on the cab side of the truck. Predominantly, these will be using the fuel port on the cab side of the truck.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Garrity?
Yes, it does, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Walker, or anything else you'd like to say to Mr. Mitchell or concerns?
I put my comments on the record.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anybody else on the board? Mr. Sachs? Oh, Ms. Kilduff. I'm sorry, Ms. Kilduff raised her hand. Let me go to her first, then I'll go to you, Larry.
How long has that building been there? How long have they been working out of there?
Honestly, I can't tell you when when Waste Management acquired that property. It was a waste hauling facility before they acquired it. If from memory, I believe the last site plan revision was early 90s, and the facility was already established as a waste hauler at that point. That was for some stormwater retention that they added.
And Bruce, how many fires have you had there in that 20 years?
I'd actually have to go back to my fire reports and count them. I can't give you an honest answer at this present time.
Okay.
I'd have to go back through the reports and look.
Okay. That's all.
Okay. I think didn't we have, Kim, these two resolutions go back to 06 and there was something back to 99, correct?
There was 03 and 06, Mr. Chairman.
06? Oh, and 03. Okay.
And I actually believe that the structures at the time were there, and then I think the 03 approval validated the structures that were there.
It was for the extra containers along the way.
Okay. I have them in my hand, but I read the one and I did not read the others. I didn't remember the date. Okay. Any other concerns from the board? Raise your hand.
I got a question, Jim.
Do her, Scott.
My question is actually for Tom Garrity. Tom, you've heard Mr. Mitchell's testimony about all the safety measures that are built into the tank, the compressors, and the fueling system. Are you satisfied with all those, with everything there that's put in place?
What I would say is that I don't know the specifics of a detailed operation like that. I have never visited one, nor I have inspected one. This will be the first in our response area. or any that are in town. I know of none. But they are around. I know there's one, North Brunswick has one, and I'm sure there's others coming. To be honest with you, I'm no expert in it, but I certainly am going to do some homework when I see the specific design of this application.
Thank you, Tom.
Mr. Chairman, if I can make one more comment.
Go ahead, Mr. Walker.
I would feel a whole lot better about this application if there was some sort of a fixed wet fire protection system that was installed along those racks.
Mr. Sachs?
Yeah, I was going to say, Mr. Sardo, it's your opera tonight, but I'm just wondering if you want to provide some additional information to Chief Garrity, to Fire Marshal Garrity, regarding whatever fail-safe measures are going to be employed. I'm sure there's documentation and exhibits that you can provide to him, and maybe take into consideration Mr. Walker's comment about an additional fire suppression system, on the fueling system. That's your call, but I just think that might be something that might be beneficial to our staff and to the board.
Agreed, and I appreciate you saying so. I guess I would just like a moment to talk to Tom Mitchell about that. If
Sure. I'll tell
Do
you.
you want to take a,
I haven't done a whisper in someone's ear on Zoom yet, so.
Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do, Mr. Sardo. We're going to take a 5-minute recess, okay?
Yes.
Okay, for those watching at home, watching on YouTube, we're going to stand in recess for 5 minutes. The time right now is 9:36, 9:41, 9:42. We will be back. Everyone, please mute yourself and turn your video off.
Thank you.
Okay. Looks like everyone is slowly coming back.
Slowly.
If you're watching on YouTube or at home, we're just waiting for all the panelists to come back on. It just might take another minute or so, hopefully not, but, and then we'll call the roll again to start the, restart the meeting.
Hi, I'm back.
Okay,
Jim, put your video back on.
Mr. Mitchell, are
My
you?
video?
Oh, mine.
Yeah, Jim, put your video back on. Yeah.
What
I
happened?
have my video.
There
No,
you go.
I must have knocked mine off. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
My question is, how does John have two?
John.
John Dewhurst.
Split personality, I guess. I don't know. He does have two. John, you're amazing. I assume Mr. Mitchell is back and your planner.
I just want to make sure the core reporter is back.
Yeah, we wait. Is Mr. Bella, are you there? Fran DeBella, are you there?
Fran?
He's here, I think.
Well, I just want to make sure she's okay and set up.
And I'm back verbally. This is Tom Mitchell, but my
Mitchell is
video,
back.
yeah, my video is giving me trouble.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Bella, are you back? We can't start without you.
Fran, are you back?
You have a contact for her, Mr. Bella?
Let me shoot her a message.
I see her microphone's on, but
Yeah, I see the yellow go around. Fran, could you just acknowledge that you're back?
Well, her video's not on either, so.
I just shot her a message. I'm waiting to hear back.
All right, Mr. Sawyer. Wait. It looks like when it's yellow, just trying to say something.
Yeah, but I can't hear her.
Yeah, neither.
And Frank, if you can hear us, can you send a message just confirming a chat?
Hi, I can hear everybody.
Oh, great.
Oh, okay, then we were waiting, okay.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
All right, Ms. Silverman, I would like to call the meeting back to order right now. I have it at 9:47. Ms. Silverman, please call the roll.
Mr. Dewhurst?
Here.
Mr. Connor?
Here.
Ms. Kilduff?
Here.
Mr. Scogno?
Here.
Mr. Walker?
Here.
Mr. Psychowski?
Here.
Mr. Stoner?
Here.
Chairman Sullivan?
Here.
Mr. Sachs?
here.
Mrs. Shapiro?
Here.
Ms. Sawant?
Here.
Mr. Garrity?
Here.
And myself, Kim Silverman.
Okay, prior to the recess, we were dealing with matter 11-2020Z. It's an application from Waste Management in New Jersey. The location is on Route 34, and they were looking to introduce CNG to replace diesel fuel. John Sardo is representing the applicant. Mr. Sardo, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After speaking to the client and just in light of what we've heard from Mr. Walker, although we do think this is very safe, state of the art, done throughout the country, we'd like the opportunity to take an adjournment to the next meeting to supplement the evidence to further support the safety aspects of this and how a suppression effort would be, what a fire suppression effort would look like for this type of fuel at this type of location. So we will be asking for an adjournment to the board's next meeting, which I believe is it 3 weeks from now?
All right, well,
Excuse me?
yeah, before we get to that, let me just ask the professionals, as long as you're going to take, you're asking for a continuance, I'd like to ask our professionals, Ms. Shapiro and Ms. Sawant, in that order, is there anything else of your concern that you would want examined as to this? Ms. Shapiro?
No, Mr. Chairman, I'm okay right now.
Okay, and Ms. Sawant?
I'm okay too.
Okay, any board members, Mr. Walker has spoken about the safety and he brings up a very good point. I can see all the board members, if you have a concern, please raise your hand in front of me so I can see you. Is there anything else you want to address? Mr. Stoner, I guess those questions are going to be asked, answered at the next meeting. Is that okay?
Yeah, well, I have a question.
Go ahead.
I just want to know if they have any kind of incidents in the past. You know, what's the track record of safety?
You're a little low in your volume. I can't make that out.
The track record on safety.
I don't know.
I'm sure they can provide that, Mr. Sardo, correct?
Yes, we could talk about other locations and
Right.
safety records, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And Mr. Walker, you pretty much, what you've asked, you're looking for is concerns over either the lack of a suppression system, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And is there any other areas you want them to address when they come back, other than what you've already stated?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right. Now I would say, Mr. Sardo, I believe, can we get Mr. Sardo on the 16th or no?
Well, I don't know how fast he can get the information to us.
So I don't know if there'd be enough time. Yeah. What do you think, Mr. Sardo?
The 16th of July?
Yes.
That's our next meeting.
We can do that.
Okay, because you have to have it to us like 2 weeks beforehand. Plus I have to get you information just for the 200-foot list. You have to you just have to send the notices out to, because of the fact that we're Zooming and they need the passwords and the code to get in.
Oh, it's a new, it'll be a new meeting ID, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And password, right.
Okay.
It's not for the newspaper. It's only to the 200-foot list people.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Sachs, anything you would like to say?
No, I think Mr. Sardo knows what he has to provide, I'm sure. And my other question, I guess, Kim, is when is the mandatory date on this? Are we up against the clock on that?
What do you mean?
When do we have to make a decision on this? The mandatory date for this application? Do you know what the?
Well, if you're gonna carry it, I mean, the expiration date was 9/18 originally, so.
9/18, September 18th?
Yeah, so.
Oh, no, we're fine. Yeah, we're good. We're good.
I wasn't worried.
Okay, all right, no problem. Okay, no, I have nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Sardo, then we're gonna do it on the 16th, correct, sir?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, well, on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank you and all your professionals this evening for their presentation to the board. We took note of everything that you said. It was quite impressive, and I hope you can come back with the proper information and perhaps satisfy the board members as to the safety aspect that was brought up.
Yep, thank you for that opportunity and for all the time and effort the board's put in this evening.
That's quite a right. And those of you who are watching at home or still watching on YouTube, this matter is not going to be completed tonight, which means there's not going to be a vote taken this evening. The matter is going to be continued, and the matter will be continued onto the calendar for July 16th meeting. I believe, Ms. Silverman, that's also going to be a Zoom meeting, is it not?
Correct.
Okay,
As
so
soon
we'll
as
do
I
an
get
electronic meeting.
the information, I'll send it.
If you're watching at home and you're interested, the next meeting of the board will be July 16th, 7:30 p.m. on Zoom. And we welcome you all back and thank you for watching tonight. Anything else final, Ms. Silverman?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, thank you again, Mr. Sardo. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the 16th. Ms. Sawant, anything else to bring before the board this evening?
No, that's it.
And Ms. Shapiro, anything to bring before the board?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Having said all that, I'm going to ask for someone to extend motion to adjourn for the evening. Someone? You know what? I'll make it tonight.
I was waiting for Bruce.
Aye.
Come on, he does it every week.
Well, he was too late.
You spoke too much.
All in favor of adjournment, raise your hand and say aye.
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 Good night, everybody. Have a great 4th.
Everyone have a safe holiday weekend approaching on the 4th. Once you get started with your professionals, thank you. All the best to you.
And happy Father's Day.
Oh,
Well, happy Father's Day,
Father's Day.
everybody.
Exactly.
Okay.
Night.
Good night,
Good night,
everyone.
everyone.
Good night.
Take care.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Good night.